Okay, welcome guys. This is another episode of Motivate OTs. My name is Tonga Chicha. I'm a senior lecturer in occupational therapy. And today it is my pleasure to host a very experienced occupational therapist. Her name is Mapheyeledi Motimele, all the way from South Africa, Cape Town. She is indeed an experienced occupational therapist. She has worked previously in academia and now she has moved on to run her own business. So I'll give you maps. I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and what you're doing before we move on to today's discussion.
Hi to everybody. As Tongai has said, my name is Maphiyeledi Motimele. I have worked in academia. I used to be a senior lecturer at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. And I've recently started my own business called Root Fed Consultancy.
Wow.
It's a healing initiative. And I'm sure in the interview we'll chat a little bit more about that. But it's something that I think is aligned with my purpose and will allow me to do the work that I felt I couldn't necessarily do within OT. So yeah,
Wow.
that's a little bit of me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great. That's interesting, and definitely we hope to hear more about what you're doing. So let's just move on with today's topic. Basically, today's topic we've kept it very simple. We just want to discuss occupational therapy. Okay, you have had training as an occupational therapist, and you have your own understanding of what occupational therapy is and what it should be like. I want to hear from you, Maps. How do you see occupational therapy as a profession? Probably, maybe you might give us a context of within the South African context or within the international context, depending on your views.
So, okay, a loaded question. I'm going to try and keep it together. So, occupational therapy, I think, let me start with maybe what drew me to it. I knew I wanted to work within human development, and I knew that I wanted to help people reach their potential, their full potential. Right. So occupational therapy, I think, within the South African context is very much in the health and rehabilitation sciences.
Yeah.
So most people, if you ask people what is OT, you find many different answers, but I understood it as rehabilitation science. And that for me, I think, really kept it within the biomedical health field. And when I studied OT, I was really happy to learn about occupational justice and social justice and the development of communities, because within a South African context, the vulnerable groups extend more than just people who are living with disabilities.
Yeah, yeah.
So it really was something that for me, I thought, wow, you can heal through your everyday activity. And it was really wonderful because I found that we were living in a context where people were constrained by their context, right? So their everyday activities was actually making them depressed, disabled, injured, sick. So because of the history of our country, it wasn't something that was available to Black people in South Africa.
Right.
And if it was through the educational or health system, and it was around correction, right? So we have helping people function, but in a very biomedical way.
Yeah.
So I one thing I love about OT is the potential that it has. And I think as practitioners, it becomes tough because I find even with students who've graduated, everybody wants to get a job, and the established OT work is in, these very biomedical services. Whereas people who want to do things differently sort of have to create their own pathway and think about how they can adapt the basic philosophy of OT to suit what it is that they want to do. So for me, it's the potential that I love about OT. And I think it's very people are going to think I'm biased, but I think it's very special people that are drawn to occupational
I
therapy.
agree. I agree.
There is something that we innately want to contribute and express, and we're looking for the proper like avenue or profession to do that in. So what I've loved about OT is that it's taught me how to think and how to understand people and how they interact with their context. But it's given me the freedom to think beyond what exists currently. Yeah, so I'm not sure if you guys have a profession, I mean, internationally, but we know that the issues that we have in Africa extending beyond South Africa. And I think if we can create our own OT instead of what developed in the global north was to suit their context, right? So how can we put forward what's important in our context and shape OT in that way? I'm really curious as to what that looks like. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, you've brought up some very, very important points there. You spoke about the potential of OT, which is fantastic. But where you really caught my attention, so to speak, is where you said you felt like the OT that you've learned is the one that was developed with sort of like a Western focus, and you say your aspirations are like to create our own OT, sort of like OT within an African context. What are the flaws, if I may put it that way, with the so-called Western understanding of OT, if you are in an African context, for example? What are the shortfalls that you have identified?
So I hear what you're asking, and it's not necessarily a flaw more than a mismatch. Does it make sense? Okay. So it's like if you have something that is a tailored outfit, a tailored suit for someone, and then you inherit it from your older brother or sister. And then, I mean, it's a wonderful suit, right? And it's beautiful and it's tailored, but it's just not for you. And it doesn't look right. It doesn't fit right. So you're constantly pulling at it, trying to adjust when it's actually not designed for you. You get what I'm saying? So
so what are the things that we need to adjust?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is our understanding of the person. So global north, the understanding of the person, physical, mental, environment, person, environment, occupation, it's very much those three parameters. Whereas we know that people are collectively based, community based. We have relationships that are important. We are spiritual beings. We have political aspects that affect how and why we do things. So for me, it's that it's the transplanting that's the problem. And if we can have our own OT philosophy for our context to say, what is our understanding of the person? What is our understanding of the context? How do these two things interact to influence what people do? What are the other factors that shape what people do and what they find meaningful? And something that I focus on in my own business is around purpose. So purpose is something that is innately spiritual. It's innately spiritual. But if you look at our curriculum, how much of the person as a spiritual being is actually covered, you know? So we have students who have like really great interactions with their clients, and they'll say like, this person affirmed my humanity, or they treated me with dignity. And those things are also spiritual concepts. So my first issue is around that I think we're limited in what we understand the person to be and how they interact with their context. And it may be so that in the global north, it's those three aspects, but I don't think that that's true. I think, you know, humanity, we have shared experiences. But the main thing is around the suitability around context. So we are we're looking at how somebody else sees things, and then we're trying to offer services through that way. Whereas human beings are the experts in their own lives, right?
Yeah.
So why are we not sitting with our grandparents and our aunts and our uncles and our disabled cousins to say, like, what is your experience of being a person? What are the things that influence that? What are your patterns of occupational engagement?
Yeah, their values.
What do you find therapeutic? So we've got a big issue with alcoholism, for example, in our context. And that is beyond people with disabilities or able-bodied people, young, the elderly. It's a huge thing.
Yeah.
And that's saying something, that our population is trying to numb themselves from engaging with day-to-day reality. As an occupational therapist, for me to understand that problem as purely an addiction is limited.
Right.
You know,
right.
That's where it's not a full understanding of it. So that's my biggest critique, I think, with OT, is that we almost like learn about the person as if it's this abstract concept, but it's something we live every day, and we're not looking around us to say, like, what do these people need? What's going on here? How do people find meaning? You know. And then the other thing with us is access within South Africa. So not everybody has access to the services that we offer. So it almost becomes a service for the elite. And that also feeds into the political issues that we have in this country as well. So yeah, I think that that's my two biggest critiques, that there's a mismatch, and we're not present, we're not applying ourselves and looking at what we see and contributing as therapists to say, actually, when you look at this policy, or when you look at this project, or I want to be a part of that development project, because I come with a perspective that is holistic.
Yeah. Thank you so much for those insights. I'm just thinking now, of course, you highlighted that something needs to happen within training of occupational therapists. Okay, and in this situation, you are referring to the African context or South African context. And you have been in academia. What's your view in terms of these ideas? Do you think these ideas can actually be implemented in curriculum development, or the processes are rigid to actually have the curricula adapted to the local context?
Yeah, so I mean, it's something that it's a question that I've been grappling with for a number of years, and I've attempted to be involved in a number of projects that will affect the content that we teach. How do we teach? And I mean, honestly speaking, the biggest thing that I've encountered is resistance, right? So resistance in terms of people, we've got a very structured way of working, right? So we use very specific ways of developing the curriculum. We consult experts in curriculum development, right? Curriculum is something it's alive, it's a lived thing, right? So it's something that you have to consult broadly about, and you need a lot of stakeholders. So I found that there are a lot of people who are invested in things remaining exactly the way they are.
I see.
So now, if you think about yourself as an educator, if you have to look at, okay, we're looking at this curriculum. What framework are you using? Why are you wanting to look at it? But then people go to university to find employment, to get jobs. So if you now train this new breed of OTs, are they going to be able to practice within the very set services that exist? Right?
Okay.
So I find a lot of students who get in touch and say, look, I want to do this differently, but if I'm busy working with reasonable accommodations, I'm bound by a very specific set of policies,
those parameters,
and employment practices. And I can't go as a rogue agent, excuse me, I can't go as a rogue agent and change things up when the person who I'm working with, you know, they need to follow, like fit a certain criteria, and the workspace needs certain support, and my role is pretty much defined, you know.
I see.
So yeah, it's difficult. And I think I found I used to work with a team of people who could see the need for the change in curriculum, wrote a text about concepts from the global south to contribute to the basic philosophy of OT from the global south. But then within that same space, we would still have colleagues teaching like the European model of occupational therapy. You understand what I'm saying? So even with the students, it becomes like, but so what are we doing? It's important for us to know these frameworks. Yeah. And then you guys on the side are contributing something else. Why isn't it part of what you are teaching and practicing? Yeah. So it's bigger than us. The resistance is bigger than us. And not everybody is invested.
I see.
In that work. Yeah. So I think for myself personally, I mean, honestly, I just got exhausted. That's the honest truth. I was involved in a number of projects within the broader faculty that was looking at doing things differently. And all of those projects became like tick box exercises. So the university could say, we've had this forum, we've had this working group. Yeah, without it translating to the actual change. Exactly. And when you think about actual change, it's a decision to say, nope, no more, we're doing things differently. Yeah, so I think for me, I realized that I wasn't going to make the impact that I wanted within that space. And, right. Yeah. Right. So okay. So now you decided to chart your own course. Yeah. And I'm interested to know how the foundational knowledge of OT or your understanding of OT in your own context, how are you then applying these principles in what you're now doing? Maybe just give us a summary. I'm sure our audience would want to know what exactly is MAPS doing now. So probably give us a brief summary of what you're doing and how your OT philosophy in an African context or in a South African context is being applied in what you are doing now. Yeah. So the OT philosophy that I'm using is really around, I mean, the basic philosophy is about learning through doing. I think that's a powerful philosophy. Right. And it's something that affirms people's capabilities. Yeah. So in starting the business, I worked with OTs who really wanted to practice differently, but didn't have necessarily the money to come and do a master's qualification to further their thinking, right? And working with them in terms of you don't need that qualification to be able to package your thinking and your intention and values in a way that is informed by theory, but also meets the needs of people. So the company that I started is called Root Fed. And the basic philosophy that we look at is, what does it mean to be fed from the root, right? So OT as a health profession or rehab profession is sort of dealing with a certain set of limitations and challenges, but not necessarily going to the root of the problem. I see. And equipping you with skills and capabilities to be able to, so we talk about nourishment from the source. So to be able to really feed yourself as a person and understand what your needs are and sort of charter your own development beyond the OT intervention. Yeah. So we use, when I say the main OT philosophy is really about learning through doing. So with the OTs that I worked with, for example, we developed a framework for health. They are based with pediatrics, And they've got a very specific framework for health that is community informed. So, I mean, they literally put together a picture of a spider web and showing the connection that actually impact child's health. So for them to see where they need to like infiltrate to be able to really support the child through this web. Very basic metaphor, but very powerful, and help them see that their theoretical knowledge can be represented in a way that's accessible to everyone. As a mom who's accessing the service, you can see where your child is, you can position yourself, and then you think about, okay, what are the other support systems that are needed in order for me to support this child? So that with OT, but then my PhD is looking at violence in the context of protest.
Okay.
And working with people who had actually had a very traumatic experience being a student within the higher education context. And because they were not disabled, there was no OT service that was available to them, right? Besides seeing a psychologist or psychiatrist and being prescribed tablets for anxiety or depression. Whereas the issue they had was a lot more complex than a purely psychological issue or a mental health issue. It was really about trying to navigate Blackness within a context that was anti-Black. Right? And where do you get services? Where do you get services that can address that? So it was a number of experiences, but the main thing, like I say, is about nourishment from the source. What is the root of the issue? But also I did some training as a spiritual counselor, an energy healer. And that was very helpful. Like I say, the understanding of the person then becomes more nuanced in terms of how our spirituality, right, affects everyday living. And being able now to incorporate that. So we learn through doing, but we do as energetic and spiritual beings. So those two things coming together really, really helped in terms of building the business now.
Wow.
And
I see.
I mean, what I'm loving about it is there's no prescribed service or way of doing things. It's really a collaboration between myself and the individual, or myself and the group of people, or the group of OTs or health professionals. We've had 2 runs of support groups for OTs. We've had support groups for OTs. And I mean, it's been such a beautiful space because they have the freedom to talk about what we're talking about now, to say, OT is not working for me in this context, and this is why. And they've been able to support each other in understanding how can they align their practice with their purpose as spiritual beings, you know? So yeah, I don't know, I could go on forever, but that is, I moved out of that academic space because I couldn't do that within my role as a student lecturer. I mean, you know what it's like. We're supervising students, we're teaching, we're basically trying to change the curriculum while we are enforcing the curriculum. It's like,
I see. Yeah.
So to navigate. So I for myself, decided to do things differently.
Wow. That's great. Thank you so much. There are 2 areas that I want us to go back to from what you have said. There is the bit about what you're doing in your organization, and then there's a bit about your PhD work that you mentioned. But I'll start with your organization. I understood that you're talking about occupational therapists who are getting support. Who are your clientele or your target population? Is it the occupational therapists or is it service users? I just want to get clarity on that.
Clientele, and that's what I love about it, is that the clientele is whoever this work resonates with, right? So I've worked with health professionals, OTs, social workers. I've worked with students who are in academia, who are not progressing or finding some challenges that student wellness is not able necessarily to cover. So if you go to the website, we really, the call has been to people who are, we use the word like they're not at ease, right? Regardless of the health services that exist, right? But you find yourself dissatisfied, depressed, you not aligned, you don't feel okay with what you're doing, right?
Okay, so it's basically
So
anybody who is feeling that they are not at ease.
Yes, they are not at ease, and there's something is not right, you know.
Wow.
So we also have a course that's on Teachable that looks at the purpose-driven life. And I think for me, that's the crux of that, to say anybody who is really thinking about understanding their purpose and how they can align this with their practice, their everyday life, their parenting, their teaching, right? Yeah. So you almost feel malaligned and you're like, no, something is
Does this
not satisfied.
Does this link to the concepts of occupational balance, or this is something totally different?
So I think there could be, I wouldn't want to link those two together. And the reason being that even before you understand what occupation is and how people are occupational beings, I think the golden thread is really around purpose. So one of the modules that we have in the course is not who am I, but why am I, right? So why are you Tongai? Like, why are you? Not why are you Tongai, but why are you as a person? You get what I'm saying? So
I get
it really forces people to think about, to go beyond the fact that we all exist on earth, we must all get a job and we must all work. It takes you deeper than that to say, think about your relationship with self and all other. What is the purpose of you here? And we really work from that, where a lot of people understand like our purpose is growth. That's our purpose, right? So how do we take that theme to the everyday things that we do? And you find balance in that way, rather than trying to look at what are the different performance areas, and then how can you balance your contribution or your time in each of those. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. So what I'll do for our audience, I will put the link to your website so that people can actually go there and have more information in terms of what is it that you are doing and the impact that you are making.
Okay. The last thing about that is that if they book a session on the site, our first consultation is free. So we don't want people to not come because you anticipate the cost. And what that really does is to make sure that what you are looking for and what we offer is aligned.
Right.
And if that is the case, then we move forward. If not, but it's free. So anybody who's curious, we'd love to connect. Yeah.
Wow. Great stuff. Thank you so much for that. Now I'll move on to the PhD work that you referred to earlier on, where you said there were students who were struggling. Was it about race? What was it about? Can you just elaborate a little bit on that and tell us how you want to address these problems?
So my PhD is looking at Roads Must Fall, the student movement that happened at UCT from 2015.
Right.
And yeah, so I've really been interviewing different role players within the Roads Must Fall movement. And really my interest as an occupational therapist is around violence. So my master's looked at disability and violence, people who were injured through violence. What was the role of patients in their healing journeys. And one of the findings in that study was that we haven't understood violence, what it is, how it manifests, what it is an expression of. So within Roads Must Fall, I was looking at that to say, we can't understand violence in outside of context. That's why we have a very vague understanding of what it is. We have to look at it in context, understand what it is, and the context that I'm looking at it is protest. So Roads Must Fall really called the university, was a call for the university to decolonize. In this context, how I got involved with some of the students that I had, student activists that I had interviewed. One of the questions that I was looking at was the consequences of engaging in protest for the health and well-being of student activists. And what I picked up is that there's no professional body that is taking the responsibility for the care of people who engage in protest. Sorry, that is labeled as violent, right? So it's like those two aspects: what really is violence, and then those who are subjected to these to violence within protest. Where do they go for healing and support?
I see.
And so that was part of the reason where I said, well, there's no way necessarily for them to go. I can offer that with Root Fed. Yeah. But it's students who really, I mean, you asked me the question about the curriculum. It's students who are really are not at ease and are no longer waiting for the processes to take place, right? To say, in order for us to change the curriculum, we don't have time for that. We want change, and we want effective change now. So they identified UBC as an anti-Black space, regardless of all the transformation policies that they have in place. And it was really calling for a deeper understanding of what is the Black students' experience within the university, and how could that be understood as violent. Yeah. So yeah, what I will say is that there's a professor, she's just retired from the University of Southern California, Professor Gelia Frank, and she has written about occupational reconstructions, and she's looked at the civil rights movement in the US and the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. So she gave her keynote at the USC symposium last year, and she asked a colleague from Brazil and myself to respond to the keynote. So there's a piece that's just come out in the Journal of Occupational Science, and that's where I talk about what this concept of occupational reconstructions, what it can potentially offer people who are interested in understanding social activism as an occupation, right? But I'm also asking people I'm asking us as OTs to think about violence as an occupation. And there's a piece there it's come out, I think, just beginning of this week, but people who are further interested in understanding how OT, or what the potential contribution of OT is to understanding violence and protest, I think that's a good piece for them to look at. Otherwise, I'll take all your interview time.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Do you understand what I'm saying? But do you see what I'm saying, in the sense that this is Roads Must Fall, then we had Fees Must Fall, then we had we've had a lot of student protests within higher education. But we've had to almost, according to our role and scope as OTs, we almost wait for them to be injured and become disabled, and then we step in, right? Why?
So it's better to be proactive.
Yes, but also as OTs, we're also political beings, right? Yes. So do we limit our contribution to rehab, whereas we've got a bigger contribution to make outside of the profession? So yeah.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much. I know our time is running. As we draw towards the end of this discussion, I want to know from you, Maps, how do you see the future of occupational therapy?
Yeah, so I am a firm believer in choice. And I think we're at a point where we're going to have to make a choice as a profession. Do we want to cost benefit analysis, right? Are we willing to risk being uncomfortable and being unsure to change? Or are we going to fight for an identity and status within the existing health framework in order to stay relevant, right? So I think we are going to have a break in OT. We're going to have so-called traditional OT, and then we're going to have rogue OTs. And I think we're going to find a lot of people who are trained as OTs, but are not necessarily practicing traditional practice. And what I would love to see is the support for those people who are that way inclined. I would like to see that support within our education system. Yeah. I do think that OTs who are established and are used to doing things in a specific way, there's also opportunity for them to reflect, right? And think about their contribution and how they would have, if they like to do things differently or if they're satisfied with the way things are. But working with OTs, we are a group of people who are not satisfied, with a lot of burnout, mental health issues, job dissatisfaction. So we have a choice to make. Are we going to continue with things as they are, or are we willing to be uncomfortable, unsure, and not fit in and see what comes up? Yeah.
Wow. What a question. Yeah. I think, every OT needs to reflect on that. I think whether you want to maintain the status quo or whether you really see that you are uncomfortable and do something about it. Thank you so much for that.
And there's no middle ground. I just wanted to say that last point, that there is no middle ground. There's no middle ground. You can stay quiet. You can stay quiet, but you must understand that you are then participating in your own oppression, whether you admit it or not. So that's why I say that it's a very clear choice you're going to have to make, to say, okay, blinders off, I want to do it differently, or hey, I'm comfortable, I don't have an issue, I'm not really badly affected, I want to remain traditional. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mabs. Any final words, maybe of inspiration or encouragement to somebody who is just enrolled in an occupational therapy program, occupational therapy students, or somebody who's contemplating whether they can get into the OT profession?
I think words of encouragement. Firstly, you've chosen a great profession, regardless of the critiques we've just discussed. You've chosen a great profession, and I think it's something that's going to shape who you are as a person, but it's also going to shape, one thing that OT taught me was how to think, right? So I feel like the contribution that you're going to make to the world is infinite. It's open. So I would say enjoy learning, ask a lot of questions, observe what you see in your environment, and bring those experiences to the learning spaces and have fun. I think OT is fun. You get to think outside the box and think about how to problem solve, and you get to work with people, which I think is one of the most amazing privileges that you find in the profession, to work with people.
Wow.
So yeah, and get in touch. I think get in touch with people like Tongai, people who are writing about things that you're interested about. I think we have the potential as a community to make a really big impact. We just need to connect and start talking.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Maps. Yes, guys, this we've been having a very nice discussion here with Mapheyeledi Motimele, all the way from South Africa, Cape Town, and she is the founder of Rootfed Consultancy. So the link to the website and everything that she is doing, you will find it definitely in the description section. So thank you so much, guys. This is Motivate Otis. And it's bye for now. Okay.
Bye. Thank you.
Great stuff.